Hey folks, welcome back to the channel. So I'm working on the two Les Pauls again today, the 87 and the 2006. And I'm going to start on this 87 today. I'm going to start with something really basic. I think you all know that I've got this modern style electronic setup for this thing. I've got a PCB style Gibson control board. I've got the two quick connect pickups. I've got a quick connect jack, and I'm going to have to make a quick connect switch. But I've got most of the setup, and you're probably wondering, like, what would it take to get one of this newer style setups into an older Les Paul like this? And the answer is it fits pretty actually well straight off the assembly line, at least from the PCB perspective. On the inside of this Les Paul here, I have been doing a little bit of sort of sanding on this inside uppermost volume pot, and it's just to make a little bit of clearance so that I can actually run a nut on the back side of this control board. I just wanted to run the nut because I think having a nut on each side of the wood is going to make this connection a lot more reliable. There's not a lot of stress on the PC board itself. I didn't have to clearance that, but this guitar is far from original anyway, and it fits a lot better that way. Other than that, this is actually a direct drop-in to an older Les Paul. You know, you kind of have to figure out which side is your volume pot and which side is your tone pot. I looked at the PC board to tell me that, and I can see where the breadboard connections are on the tone pot and the tone capacitor. So that tells me that these are the tones and these are the volumes, which if you're holding the guitar upright in a right-handed position, that puts the Gibson logo straight up and down, so that makes sense to me. It also puts the jack near the jack hole. The only other thing to note about this, obviously somebody cut off my switch here, so I'm going to have to redo this connection. And also somebody cut the quick connect connector off of my jack, so I had to make a new one for that. The other thing I did was, you can see that these capacitors are not the stock capacitors. The stock capacitors are about half this size, and they connect to two other points. There's two small connectors right next to each other on the board there, and two next to each other on the board there. And then there's this further one out that wasn't used, and I realized through use of an ohm meter that the one that's underneath here and the outside one were actually connected together, and that I could connect a tone capacitor across these two outsidemost points and use a bigger capacitor that way. And I really like these Mylar film capacitors. They're made by Mallory, much nicer than the original, you know, little, I don't know what they are, ceramic or whatever they were. Anyway, really cheap little capacitors. Anyway, upgraded those. So I've been playing around for a few minutes, and I've got the depth set for my jam nuts here on the back side of the body, and let me show you how it looks when I drop it in. So you kind of have to finesse it a little bit, but you can see I've got everything set up now where I've got just enough of the stem of the pot sticking through that I can get a washer and a nut on there, and not much more. That's kind of where I want those. That's going to leave my knobs as close to the body as they can be, and that's where I want them. So each one of these, I'm just going to drop a nut over it, a washer first and then a nut. Give it a little bit of a start, and then I can tighten them down once I get them all started. I don't want to go crazy on tightening these just because I'm worried about the strength of that PCB to begin with, but I also don't want these to move around. So I'm using that German specification of Gudentight. By the way, the torque of each one of these affects the other one, so you kind of have to go around twice. All right, I think that's exactly where I want these things. I'm not going to bother test fitting any knobs. They all stick through about the same amount, so I'm not worried about that. All right, so next, I think I'm going to go ahead and mount the pickups. All right, so now for the magic of why someone might want to use a quick connect set of pickups, because they quickly connect with no soldering. So I've got a set that these are a 490R and a 490T. The only reason that matters is because the R is in the rhythm position and the T is in the lead position. And they have these quick connects on them, and they have plenty of wire on there, so I'm not worried about having any issues connecting, but they just feed right through. If you're wondering about orientation, when you orient humbuckers on a Les Paul, you always want the exposed screws sort of opposite each other, so the rhythm pickup's going to have the exposed screws up towards the neck, and the bridge pickup's going to have the exposed screws toward the bridge. And they are labeled from the factory, neck and bridge. So I don't even have to worry about them looking the same. When they come through the cavity, they will be identifiable by their labels. Now let me pull these things through here. Alright, now I don't actually have all the screws for these yet, so I'm just going to install a couple of screws on each one to hold it in place. And then I got to go to the hardware store and get some more screws. Okay, so with the screws in place, you can kind of see the look that I'm going for. I've got a nickel bridge and tailpiece. I've got another cream ring here. And I've got some like orange or copper knobs for this thing. And I think the combination is going to look kind of cool. But anyway, let's get back to these pickups. So like I was saying, the benefit of using these quick connect pickups is that they just literally plug right in and sit there. And you don't have to do any other wiring. And just like that, my pickups are installed. All right, well, before I get to the switch, I did want to just test fit some of the plastics. So you can sort of see what this guitar is gonna look like when it's all done. I don't quite have all the parts. I don't have the knobs yet, but this pickguard just showed up and it's the correct color. It's an actual Gibson part. These are actual Gibson pickup rings. I don't think this is an actual Gibson ring here. And you can almost see the difference probably in the camera of the two parts, but it's far enough away that I think I'm just going to go ahead and use it. I'm going to go ahead and test fit the bridge and the tailpiece though. The bridge and the tailpiece that I've selected for this guitar are Gibson parts. Now Gibson is a famous name, but Gibson as a company does not exist in the way that it existed back in the 50s and 60s when it was really popular. This is sort of probably a shell company that imports these parts from overseas, but you know, it's still a nice looking piece and the price was right, so I'm going to install these and see how they fit. Alright, well this one sticks a little bit, so I don't know if there's some trash in there or what, but I'm going to give it a look real quick. Okay, there's definitely some paint in there, so that was probably always sticky. So let's just see what happens if we run it in with a screwdriver. Okay, no problem. That fits just right. Under normal circumstances, there really is nothing holding this tailpiece on except the string tension, so I'm going to have to leave it off for now. Let's see how these bridge posts fit. Those are going to fit perfect. It actually makes me wish I had ordered a Gibson bridge for the gold guitar, but I did order the Geiger bridge and it's working out okay. If I had ordered this one, I think it would have come with much more standard bushings. And I bet this is just going to drop on. Famous last words, but yeah, actually that is the case. Famous last words. Let me back these out just a bit and see if I can get it on that way. Okay, so that fits well. All right, so perfect. I can now get this on and adjust these. Now these are nickel parts. I've ordered nickel pretty much everything on this guitar. So there's nickel bridge, nickel tailpiece, and nickel tuners. And I've got a nickel switch. These are chrome, I believe. They match pretty well. Okay, well, not to get too far ahead of myself, I'm gonna go ahead and take off some of these parts because I still have to do a polish ultimately. And you know, there's a little bit of cleanup work to do in this area of the guitar right here. Someone's tried to do some repairs in here and it didn't really work out that well. I'm just going to try to get it back to a smooth finish. Alright, so I mentioned the switch would be my next thing in terms of the wiring. And so I do have to deal with this bridge wire here, but I'm going to leave that for a minute. What I had to order was basically a new connector, and they are made by Molex. This is what they call a 5x1 connector, which means it's got a single row, 5 pins. And it does plug in and it works fine. I just got to keep in mind what direction everything goes. I have the original connector. That's giving me a hint as to what color wires go where. So it looks like we've got a black, white, red, green, and then a black. Now I'm guessing that one of these is going to end up being a ground. And I can figure that out with my ohm meter. So back of the pot, I should be able to test which one of these has connectivity to ground. And it looks like it's going to be that far side one toward the inside of the guitar there. Well, actually it looks like both sides do. Okay, well I can definitely tell what wires go to what just based on what's going on in here. And I think these two outside ones are both grounds. The white one and the red one are going to be my two pickups. because one of them has 7.85 resistance and the other one has 7.74 resistance. Those are kilo ohms. And then there's a green wire. I'm going to guess that green wire is common, so that probably goes to the jack. I could test that. Yeah, okay, so I definitely have connectivity to one side of the jack connection there. Let's just test to make sure the other side is ground. And it is. Okay, so I think I know what I need to do to rebuild this connection. All right, when you order this Molex connector, you get both sides. You get the female and the male. And you have to pay attention to which side you want to use. But you have to make sure that you're using the female silver pins in combination with this switch connector. Now the other thing that I had to buy was some of this 5-conductor wire. And it's got basically 4 shielded conductors and 1 bare conductor. All right, so I've been wiring off camera, but I've got this Molex connector attached to my 5-conductor wire. Got the switch wired up. I just basically matched up the colors to what it was before. Same with down here, matched up the colors to what it was before. These little connectors, by the way, these little Molex pins or whatever, you can install those without an actual Molex crimp tool. It's just kind of a pain, and you got to do it with a pair of needle nose pliers and really get in there. I found a video on this on YouTube, so I'm sure you can find it too. Now that that's installed, I just got to feed this sucker through here. And I'm going to take this nut off here. And we've got to seat the switch just like that, and it should plug right in. And I made my wire just long enough to reach this and no longer. And it plugs in fine. Now I'm going to do a couple of tests and see if my connections are right. And so what I can basically do is see if I've got connectivity to all the right pots from the switch. Okay, so let's test this one out. This one should be the bridge. So that should be in one of these. Yeah, that's that one right there. Okay, perfect. I just want to make sure that I've got connectivity to this pot, which should control the bridge volume. Now on this one, this is the, I gotta change my switch position so that it's open, but this one is the neck pickup. So I should have connectivity here, and I do. Okay, so that is correct. And then of course, if I put it in the middle, the switch in the middle, it really won't matter where I've got my connectivity. They should both come out to 0, and they do. Okay, so that looks like everything's in the right place. We're basically wired. I've got to do the jack, but I don't have a jack plate yet. We'll probably do that next episode. All right, turn my attention back to the white 2006. I've got most of my electronics run in here. So basically I dropped in that switch earlier, did the wiring on that I showed you. Stripped that back a little bit. I've got my 2 pickup leads coming off of that. Got my jack leads coming off the other side, and I've routed those through. Don't have my jack just yet, but that's coming. I've got my pickups run through. So I've got these 2 braided pickup wires that I'm going to use for the pickups. I actually had to extend the wires on the original pickups. Again, I'm using a 490R and a 498T on this one. And I've got, let's see what else, a couple of orange dips that I've dropped in here. There's my cavity there. It's got these little Sprague 22 nanofarad caps that go in there, and I've got a ground wire run between all the pots. It's in a U shape, so it doesn't complete that trapezoid. It's just in that U. So there's one to here, to here, here to here, and here to here. So that's the basics of where I'm going. Now, this top volume pot is for the neck pickup. The bottom one's for the bridge pickup. So I've got to wire the pickups to those. Then I've got to wire the switch connection for each of those pickups to those. I've already got the tone pots, like I said, wired. The tone pots just get one of their lugs grounded and the other one goes to the tone cap. So nothing serious there. And I debated on whether or not to use a treble bleed circuit in here. I think I'm not going to do it. I think I just want this thing to be completely vintage wired, so I'm not going to do that. So I'm going to go ahead and strip back these pickup wires and get ready to put those in next. All right, well, I stripped back the pickup wires, got them soldered in here. That's the end result. So I've got the different pickups soldered into that first lug on the volume pot, then the switch soldered into the second lug, and of course the tone pot string off of those. I do have a temporary jack that I hooked up here just for a second for testing, and my pickups are working just fine. And there's a little bit of a shot of the front just so you can see the progress of where I'm at. Before we wrap up, let me show you where I'm at with the red one, because I've got the pickguard mounted, and I'm really almost ready for full assembly on it, except I need the nut and the jack, which should be here in a couple of days. All right, here's where things stand on the red one. I've got the pickguard mounted now, and I've got the switch final mounted, and I've got everything kind of together on it. Really not much left to do, although I do have to buff the back here. I did some wet sanding back here because there was a lot of damage, but I've got most of that sorted out. Everything's plugged in except for the jack. I'm just missing a jack plate here. That's the reason I can't install that yet. I did the bridge wire. I just extended that because it wasn't long enough from the factory. From the factory, it was meant to just kind of solder right to the back of that pot right there. That's not what I can really get away with on this PCB style connection. There's actually a quick connect for the bridge wire itself, so I had to extend it to reach that. I've tested this out too. It does sound good, and it's actually a lot less noise than the old vintage style wiring, but that's not completely surprising. But at any rate, I'll do the buff on this. I've got the strap button hole fixed here on the bottom, and that was just the funniest thing. I pulled a blue plastic wall anchor out of that hole. Somebody had put in there to, I guess, I don't know, make their strap more secure, but I wouldn't trust that for anything. And of course the upper strap hole, it's okay. I may end up redoing that one too. And I've got a little bit of, like I said, buffing here, and I might buff the neck. Here's a quick shot of the front again, just to point out the fact that I did buff this, so hopefully the back that's wet sanded right now comes out the same as this top. Next time I plan on getting into the inlays on the 2006 Les Paul. I appreciate you guys hanging out with me. I appreciate all the likes and all the comments. I really love it when you guys subscribe, and I'll see you next time.